Okay, welcome back. We're on page 987 talking about software patches. And so, yes, automatic works fairly well, but in a corporate environment, maybe you want to download the patch and try it on a few machines to make sure everything works before you blast it out to everyone. Because in the past, there have been some scenarios where the patch actually caused some problems. So what they're suggesting is have a regular schedule, like how like Microsoft does a Patch Tuesday thing. Have a plan to include a fallback plan. In other words, I've installed this on the first 10 machines in the organization, and I'm thinking there's something funky going on. I need a way to get them back. So I need to have a fallback plan. Subscribe to the mailing list and the blog things. Those are very, very important, because otherwise you won't know what's going on. If you just wait for a patch to occur, then that's not quite the same as we found a vulnerability in this. We recommend you turn this feature off until a patch arrives. Right? If you're just waiting for the patch, well, then you're going to be vulnerable. So how would you know that? Well, you need to subscribe to these security mailing lists. Have an accurate inventory. Once again, if you've got a server in the closet, a print server hiding in a closet that's been there for 10 years and no one even knows that it's there, but it's hooked up to the network and it's doing a print server thing, if you don't even know it's there, chances are it's probably not up to date with all its patches. Just saying. Okay, so we talked about how you can minimize your footprint. So I'm going to go back to my guy here, and I'm going to use a thing called netstat. So netstat is a way that you can basically tell what things are. Well, let me just go ahead and hit netstat. It's going to show me a bunch of sockets and streams and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it that I want to give me the numbered list, and then I want to just find all the things where it's currently listening. Okay, so give me a listing of all the ports that are currently being listening to. Okay, that was hard to say. So it looks like I've got port 445, 36, 159, all these little port numbers here I'm currently listening on. And then it shows me, what actual, which one of the services is actually listening on those ports. So I have an awful lot of ports that I'm listening on. Maybe I should have run that through more. Let's just do that again through less. Okay. So it doesn't look like I'm listening on port 80. Okay. Which is good. I am listening on 139. I wonder if that was because I installed the SMB components. Okay. My point is that if you find unnecessary one of these guys, you probably need to do something about it. So finding ports that are open, you can use netstat. Another one called SS, which is actually better, and it's the one that Ubuntu prefers. There's one called LSOV. We don't have that one installed yet, so just hang on. So that closing down unnecessary ports, that's a very good thing to do. Remote event logging. Yes, I need to be able to see what's going on in these events all over my network. Every single machine needs to be reporting back to a central server so I can look at their events logs and run grep and find things that are funky. Backups. Well, that's kind of self-explanatory. Yeah, you're going to need to do backups of your machines in case there's a problem. Viruses and worms. Now, you might think, well, there's hardly any viruses and worms in the Linux world. Well, it kind of sort of depends. If you look at it from percent population, Linux is very small compared to Windows. Windows is huge. And so let's just say that 90%, I'm making these numbers up, 90% of the computers in the world are running Windows and 10% is running Linux. And so there was 90 vulnerabilities found over here and 10 vulnerabilities found over here. You go, wow, look at that. We only got 10 and they got 90. But percent-wise, it's about the same, isn't it? Right? So there's no rejoicing in the fact that it appears like there's fewer viruses in the Mac world or the Linux world. That's just not the case. If you were actually to look if you're actually just to count the number of vulnerabilities, not looking at much of the detail, just counting, Mac OS has more security alerts than Microsoft. Okay, so rootkits on page 990. Yes, you could install something, a malware on your machine, which boots up and then actually has, since it actually interferes with the operating system as it is. It intercepts function calls and makes it, I can make a directory, for example, disappear. Okay, that's kind of cool. So it's self-hiding code. It runs, it goes and hides itself, and then it just kind of, every time you boot your system up, it's just running a modified version of Linux. There was a Sony implemented a very draconian copy protection scheme way back when, and on Windows, where if you had a movie or a song, a CD, and you put it in your machine, it would automatically install basically a rootkit that made sure that you weren't able to copy that guy. Okay, now they did it for good reasons. Okay, well, I'm sure that's what they thought. But reality, what it is, they've proved that rootkits are easy to do and anyone could do it, and therefore they got yelled at really big because, oh my God, you've told everyone how to do this. It's like, well, yeah, that's true. Packet filtering. So yes, you're probably going to need a firewall. Hey, by the way, what do you think? We just installed Ubuntu Server. So does it have a firewall? Yeah, it comes with one. You don't have to install one. It comes pre-installed. Great. You think maybe it's turned on? No. Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard of? Anyways, there's a thing called IP tables. Okay. That basically go through and say, here's what I want, here's what I don't want, here's what I'm filtering on, those kind of things. Okay, password and multi-factor thing. Yeah, when you're trying to come up with these things, just having a simple name and password is just a single factor authentication. You probably need 2 or 3 factor authentication, or you have like a card or some sort of a doodad that says I have, not just something that I know, because I know my password and my username. It's something that I physically have, so that if you're in Texas and the bad guy's in Hong Kong, he can't get in because he doesn't have the thing that you have. Okay, so 3-factor authentication. I always love to show this little clip in my security class of the episode of The Big Bang when they have a retinal scanner at the door, and the 3 kids, the 3 main characters, come up and are playing with the retinal scanner. In Hollywood, they use just a retinal scanner. Okay, so how many factors is that? That's 1. Right? So that's not how those things are designed. They're designed to be used as 2 or 3 factors. In the real world, here's how it would work. If you want real 3-factor, here's what you would do. You have a name and a password, that's factor number 1. A key card that you stick in some slot, that's factor number 2. And then your iris recognition, facial recognition, which is 3. Okay? But the facial recognition by itself, that's just 1 factor. That is not 3-factor. Okay. Vigilance. Yes, you're gonna have to be paying attention in the security world. You cannot fall asleep. Application penetration testing. Basically, whenever you get a piece of code, you basically are assuming that this code is good. It's been approved by somebody, hopefully even tested by somebody. There very well could be some approval documentation that goes along with it that basically says, this has been certified by, XYZ Corporation or something. On page 992, they start talking about passwords and user accounts. So, password changes. So you can set this thing up. So here's a typical thing you would do. If you have a root password, which in our Ubuntu world, we don't actually have a root password, but just bear with me. So root passwords are, how about this? Anyone who's in an administrator group should probably change their password every 6 months. Okay. That's basically just a rule of thumb thing that you ought to do. So let's talk about password aging and password links. Age links. What's the right term, I guess. So why wouldn't I just say, well, oh, shoot, if it's that important, I think I'm going to change it every 30 days. You have to change your password. And wait a minute, this is really important. Why don't we have it change every 10 days? What would happen if we change the administrator password on our Ubuntu system every 10 days? What would happen? You would write it down, because it'd be like, why bother to memorize what the password is? Because in 10 days it's going to change. So you would write it down. So you can't make these things too short, right? The password useful period of time really ought not be shorter than 30 days, because that'll encourage people to write things down. Remember, those pesky humans are the real problem here. So 6 months is actually pretty decent for root. Okay. A lot of people have password vaults. For example, they have one of those systems where you download some software, and then every time you go to a website that has a name and a password, it automatically looks into this password vault and provides all the stuff for you. It's pretty cool. Yeah, you got to make sure that no one breaks into the vault and steals all the keys. And if you do an awful lot of shopping or online forums or something, man, you could have, I probably have, I don't know, 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen accounts and passwords. Now, I don't have a store-bought vault. I have another technique that I use. I use an encrypted file that basically keeps all these things for me. But who can remember all those dang passwords and all those names? And some of the super duper ones, when you come up to a place that asks for a name and password, it can randomly generate a password for you. It's keeping track of it, so why do you care, right? It doesn't have to be something you can remember, because you're not being tasked to remember it. The only one you need to remember is how to get into the system. And then from then on, every website you go to, you're no longer charged with the responsibility of remembering the password, because you're using one of these password vaults. Okay. Some people carry passwords around, a little slip of paper in their wallet or something. Okay, I'll admit, if you get mugged in an alley, the likelihood of someone finding a piece of paper that says, Kumquat 42 on there, they would probably look at it and go, right, and throw that away, right? But if a bad guy is disguised as a mugger and mugs you and takes your wallet, well, then that's pretty bad, right? Okay. So there's lots of things, lots of password things, password logging, keeping, vault kind of scenarios. I'm very familiar with all the ones that are in Linux, in the Windows world, but there's one called Secret Server, and there's a bunch of others in here. So let's talk about password aging one more time. So if I want to change the age of a password, it uses this command called chage, okay? And it kind of sort of looks like I misspelled something, because it almost looks like hey man, you left a letter out. No, it didn't. So chage is basically going to tell me how to do this. So there's a minimum and maximum between password changes. In other words, you may not change any more frequent than, I don't know, once a week. Okay? And then you must change it at 180 days. Okay? So you see the minimum, maximum. So what would be the point of having a minimum? What would be the point? What's the use case for a minimum password age? So here's how it would work. I don't want you to go in there and say, well, you made me change my password, and so I'm going to change it back to what I had before. But the machine's going to remember what those passwords are, so you can only do 10 of them, right? It'll remember the last 10 passwords. So if I told you it took 10 days before you could change your password, and then you wouldn't be able to change it, and then 20 days you wouldn't be able to change it, and 30 days you wouldn't be able to change it. After 100 days, you would finally be able to change it back to your favorite password that you had before. So this would encourage people to not reuse passwords. Okay. We're coming up on the 15-minute mark. You know how this works.